Have you ever been just a little too excited about investing into a company? You couldn't wait to hand over your hard-earned money. Maybe you were just trying to get in early on an IPO and you thought the stock might continue to rise. You thought you were doing the smart thing, only to check in a day or two later and see that the stock price is way lower than what you paid. You overpaid for your shares.
As if.
Conservative investors are willing to take risks on an IPO, but they might wait until the hype dies down a bit. Shares might dip significantly a day or so later, or maybe they'll continue to rise. No one can predict the stock market, so there's no way to know for sure. But if it does dip, not only is it possible to take advantage of the situation, but it's actually a really good idea. Something you can do is called averaging down your stock holding. This is smart because it ensures a lower break-even point for your stock position and higher dollar gains. The lower your break-even point, the less you lose in the event that a company goes bankrupt and shares become worthless. You may get nothing if a company enters liquidation. A company can potentially cancel existing shares. Owners of common stock are often the last in line for any payments. Because of the way stocks are traded, an investor who doesn't understand how fluctuating share prices affects their wealth can lose a lot of money. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can plan responsibly to make calculated share purchases and lower your average share price. I'll also show you how you can make calculated share sales, where you can decrease the amount of money you have invested while keeping the same number of investments. Here we have a spreadsheet that was made using Google Sheets. If there's a company that you're invested in and you're not too happy with how the share price has been looking lately, you might benefit from some quick math help to lower that average share price. This spreadsheet already has the necessary equations stored into the appropriate boxes, so you don't have to worry about anything more than typing in a few simple values. I'm going to start with a very quick mini math lesson to explain how share costs are averaged. It's important that you understand this concept before we get started. Now more than ever, investments are being made from your cell phone between text messages and scrolling through social media. So chances are a lot of investments are being done without the proper planning. But when it comes to managing your money, you should always plan ahead. Another reason it's important to understand the equations is so that you could eventually set up your own spreadsheet, or at the very least, customize one to better fit your needs. If you'd like for me to put together a video explaining how I made this particular spreadsheet, just let me know in the comment section below. And in the meantime, let's take a minute to go over a little bit of math before going over the stock scenarios. See, that wasn't so bad. Now, let's go over how you can lower your average cost and make the most out of your investments. First thing I would do to get started is put in the ticker symbol of all of the companies from your portfolio that have potential for lowering their average cost. I've already done this part for us. Today we're going to look at Nicolai, Peloton, Catalyst Pharmaceuticals, Neo, and Daco New Energy. Once you have your ticker symbol in the box on the left, you'll be focusing on the next two columns labeled Past. This is where you put in what you already own, how many shares, and at what price per share. Then you're going to move on to the next two columns labeled Present. Perhaps you're anticipating a dip or just hoping for one, or maybe you happen to catch a dip early one day. If you're considering buying some shares to lower the average cost, it might be best to play around with the numbers before you make the purchase. So this is where you would indicate the number of shares to be purchased and at what price per share. The green column, which is also labeled present, will automatically calculate how this potential purchase will impact your average cost, or the dollars per share. You can't just average two share prices together unless the number of shares you're buying is equivalent to the number of shares you already own. In any other situation, you'll have to use the equation I showed you in our quick mini math lesson earlier, or you can use a spreadsheet like the one I set up for us today, which will already have the formula that you need stored inside of it. Once this is done, you're going to move over to the columns labeled Future. This is where you could start to make plans for after you've successfully purchased any additional shares. Maybe you'd like to toy around with the idea of selling some of these shares at a certain price. Ideally, people like to sell shares for a price higher than their average share price. But maybe you just want to get some off your hands and you're okay with selling them at your average share price. I know some of you are probably thinking, why would I want to sell at my average share price? Obviously, I would rather make a profit. But when you're just trying to get these shares off your hands and you only purchased a few extra shares to lower your average cost, getting rid of them at the average share price is actually not such a bad idea. There are two main tax scenarios that you need to be aware of when you're selling stocks and making a profit. At the time of the sale, in the first scenario, you have owned these shares for more than 1 year, and in the second scenario, you have owned the shares for less than 1 year. Looking at the first scenario, if you sell shares after you've held on to them for longer than 1 year, you'll pay capital gains tax on any profits you take, which is more than likely 15%. Capital gains tax can be 0, 15, or 20%, depending on your income that year. I'll share a link to this page from the IRS website in the description box below if you want to read more about capital gains tax rates. Now looking at the second scenario, if you sell shares after holding on to them for less than 1 year, you would basically add any profits you make to your regular income, and the taxes you pay would be according to your tax bracket for that year. Tax brackets can change from year to year, and your income may vary, so always make sure you're using up-to-date information. I'll also share the link to this page so you can figure out approximately what you anticipate your tax rate will be. You definitely want to keep an eye on your profits, because collecting profits from stock sales could move you into a higher tax bracket, especially if you are already on the higher end of your current tax bracket. If this happens, you would owe more money than you were maybe planning for at the end of the year. This isn't a punishment or a fine, but you earned more money, so you owe more in taxes. As advice, I would overestimate the tax rate so you can set aside more than necessary. Non-Roth investments require you pay taxes when you sell off your shares, so the tax is not already withheld for you like you may be used to with your salary. So it can create a big headache if you aren't prepared to pay those taxes at the end of the year. Moving back to the spreadsheet, the future columns allow you to explore a hypothetical scenario where you hope to sell a certain number of shares at a specific price. For the hypothetical scenario examples in this video, I am not going to focus on creating a profit selling the extra shares. Instead, I'm going to focus on getting these extra shares off of our hands and selling the exact number of shares purchased in that second round when we were lowering your average share price at the price found in the green column, or in other words, at your exact average share price. Now I know that this obviously means you're not making a profit, you're breaking even. People who don't want to keep all of that money invested and continue to own those extra shares of a certain stock will want to sell at the point when the share price reaches their average cost. So if you're merely taking advantage of the dip opportunity to lower your average price, don't screw around. Just set a limit order to sell the number of shares that you just bought at the new average price and wait for it to happen. I will do one example to show how the spreadsheet would work out if you were trying to forecast selling off shares above your average share price. The next column in purple right here will indicate the profit, which is the only part that is taxable, and underneath it, the amount owed towards taxes based on the rate indicated in the box at the top of the column. This spreadsheet is currently using 25% as the tax rate, just as an example. Anyone with this spreadsheet could modify the tax rate by changing the 25 in the box at the top of the column to any number they'd like. And the last two columns are just to show you how many shares you'll be left with after any sale and the average price of those remaining shares. So let's get started with a few examples. Here we're going to start with Nicolai, ticker NKLA. On June 9th, Nicolai's share price had a low of $57 and a high of $93.99. Let's pretend that you bought 100 shares of Nicolai at $75 per share. This means you invested $7,500 into Nicolai on this day. Then, on August 14th, one share of Nicolai was between $44.36 and $46.95. You can take advantage of this dip opportunity to lower your average cost. If you were to buy 25 shares at $45 per share, you would be investing an additional $1,125 into Nicolai on August 14th. But remember, this is intended to be temporary. This purchase would recalculate your average cost to $69 per share from the original $75 per share. So it lowers your average cost by $6 per share. This is actually the scenario I worked out as an example in the mini math lesson earlier. If you're optimistic about the company, which I hope you are if you've invested in it, you're probably anticipating the average share price to continually rise. You can set a limit order to sell 25 shares of Nicolai once it reaches your newly lowered average cost of $69 per share. If or when that sale goes through, the sale would be for $1,725, even though you paid $1,125 for the most recent 25 shares. This might feel like you're profiting $600, but this is actually not the case. Since you sold 25 shares at your average cost, you actually have $0 of taxable profit at this time. However, if you sold 25 shares at $4 more than your average cost, you would profit 4 times 25, $100. Even though the sale is $1,825 now, only $100 is profit, so only that portion is taxable. At a hypothetical 25% tax rate, you would understandably owe $25 in taxes for this sale. After either sale, you will still own 100 shares of Nicolai at an average price of $69 per share. Now to clarify, just because you put something into a spreadsheet doesn't mean it's going to happen. This isn't a magic spreadsheet. You can't predict the future or guarantee that it will reach a certain price. You need to do research. You need to be realistic. You don't know if or when that stock price will reach any number. It could happen the next day, or it could happen a year from then. It may never happen. So these are all decisions you'll have to make on your own. I'm just showing you an easy way to work out the math and showing a basic option for lowering your share price when there's a dip in the market and you have the opportunity. Now let's look at Peloton, ticker PTON. On August 3rd, Peloton's share price had a low of $69.10 and a high of $73.21. Let's pretend you bought 20 shares of Peloton at $72 per share on August 3rd. That means you invested $1,440 into Peloton. But then, on August 14th, one share of Peloton was between $64.08 and $67.75. How could you take advantage of this small dip opportunity to lower your average cost? If you were to buy 5 shares at $65 per share on August 14th, then we can see you'd be investing an additional $325. That particular purchase would recalculate your average cost to $70.60 per share. So it lowers your average cost by $1.40 per share. Then, if you're optimistic about Peloton, you're probably anticipating the average share price to continue to rise. Let's say you set a limit order and sell 5 shares of Peloton once it reaches your newly lowered average cost of $70.60 per share. Because your average cost is now lower, your shares are going to reach that price sooner than they would reach your former average price because it was obviously higher. This allows you to get these shares off your hands sooner. If or when that sale goes through, the sale would be for $353. So even though you spent $325 on those 5 shares back on August 14th, you're hoping to sell those 5 shares for a total $28 more than what you paid for them. And then you can use that money however you wish because you're not going to be owing any tax on this. This is all just your money. There's no profit right now. It just might feel like profit, but it's just a result of you lowering your average cost. You really have $0 of taxable profit. After selling 5 shares of Peloton at the average price or higher, you will own 20 shares of Peloton like you did in the beginning, but now at an average price of $70.60 per share. Like I explained earlier, if a company goes bankrupt or share prices plunge and never recover, by having a lower average cost, you lose less. Now we're going to look at Catalyst Pharmaceuticals, ticker is CPRX. On July 9th, Catalyst Pharmaceuticals had a low of $4.97 and a high of $5.19 per share. Let's pretend you bought 1,000 shares of Catalyst Pharmaceuticals at $5 per share on this particular day. But then, fast forward, and on August 14th, 1 share of Catalyst Pharmaceuticals was between $3.33 and $3.53. Perhaps you want to take advantage of this opportunity or dippertunity to lower your average cost. If you were to buy 1,000 shares at $3.50 per share, you would be investing an additional $3,500 into Catalyst Pharmaceuticals on August 14th. So it lowers your average cost by 75 cents to $4.25 per share. And when you have 1,000 shares, that's a nice amount. Since we're buying the same number of shares as had been previously owned, you really could just average the 2 prices together to create the new average cost. This only happens when the number of shares are in a 1-to-1 ratio. Then, obviously, if you have high hopes for Catalyst Pharmaceuticals, you're anticipating the average share price will continue to rise. Let's say you set a limit order to sell 1,000 shares of Catalyst Pharmaceuticals. Once it reaches your newly lowered average cost of $4.25 per share. If or when that sale goes through, the sale would be for $4,250. So even though you recently spent $3,500 of your savings or hard-earned money on 1,000 shares on August 14th, as soon as that sale potentially, ideally goes through, you will be collecting a total of $750 more than what you paid for those 1,000 shares back on August 14th. And again, you can use that money however you wish because you are not going to be paying any tax on this. This is all just your money. There's no profit right now. It just might feel like it, but it's all your money. You really have $0 of taxable profit. By lowering your average cost, you're taking money out of what you have invested and maintaining the same number of investments. This way you have more money to invest in either other companies, pay your rent, pay your mortgage, buy food, whatever you want to do with that money. After the sale, you will own 1,000 shares of Catalyst Pharmaceuticals at an average price of $4.25 per share. Let's take a look at NEO next, ticker NIO. On July 13th, NEO had a low of $13.16 and a high of $16.44. And then let's pretend you bought 25 shares of NEO this day for $15 per share. Fast forward to August 14th, 1 share of NEO was between $12.54 and $13.18. Even though this isn't a significant dip, the more shares of something you own, the more significant that dip. And if you want to invest in a company a lot later because it ends up taking off and being super successful, perhaps a company like Tesla, the lower your average share cost, the less affected it will be by you purchasing more expensive shares later. And that's what we'll talk about in the bonus section. So if you want to take advantage of the price on August 14th to lower your average cost, you could potentially buy, say, 30 shares at $13 per share. If you decide to do this, you would be investing an additional $390 into NEO on August 14th. That would recalculate your average cost to $13.91 per share. So it lowers your average cost by $1.09 per share. The lower your average cost, the less affected you will be in the event of a crash or if you're forced to sell shares at an inopportune time. Then, if you're super confident about NEO, you're anticipating the price to continue to rise, so you could set a limit order to sell those 30 shares of NEO once it reaches your newly lowered average cost of $13.91. If or when that sale goes through, the sale would be for $417.30. So you spent $390 on 30 shares on August 14th, but you are eventually hoping to sell those 30 shares for $417.30. Again, this is all your money. There's no profit, $0 of taxable profit, $0 going towards taxes. You could do whatever you want with the money, reinvest it, whatever, it's yours. After the sale, you will own 25 shares of NEO at an average price of $13.91 per share. Last up, we're going to look at Daqo New Energy, which is ticker DQ. So let's pretend you just went in and bought 10 shares of DQ at $119.26 per share on July 23rd. Then the very next day, July 24th, you noticed that there was a pretty significant dip in price and you were able to grab 5 more shares of DQ for $102.04 per share. So you invested temporarily an extra $510.20 into DQ. This investment did exactly what you wanted and you lowered your average cost, and you happened to lower it down to $113.52 per share. So you brought your average down by $5.74 a share. You set a limit order to sell 5 shares of DQ once it reached that newly lowered average cost, and it actually did that just a few days later, and you made a sale for $567.60, which was actually $57.40 more than what you had just paid for those 5 shares back on July 24th. So when all is said and done, you still own 10 shares of DQ, but your average price had dropped from $119.26 per share to $113.52 per share. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I hope you spend that extra money that you just saved yourself wisely. I hope this helped you understand how it really isn't that scary to make a few very careful and calculated moves to lower your average cost. But you really should plan ahead. You should always do research. You shouldn't just do this to any company. Pay attention to the stock, watch the prices, know what's happening with the company so you know what to expect. When might it go down? When will it go up? Maybe it just tends to oscillate between certain numbers. It's a strong growth company. You have to do your work, but you don't have to leave so much money on the table all the time. You want 10 shares of a company. Well, okay, if you have a chance to lower your average cost and take some of that money out and use that money on something else, well, now you're investing smarter. So don't work harder, work smarter. Hope this was helpful. Again, if this video gets 5 whole likes, I will share this spreadsheet in the next video. If you want me to work out certain scenarios for you, just describe them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to work those out for you and help you understand the math behind the moves you might want to make. There's going to be a bonus part 2 video related to the content in this particular video. The bonus video is actually going to explore what happens when you've already been responsible and you've purchased a certain number of shares and you've lowered your average price, but now a company's doing even better than you imagined and the price has skyrocketed. You don't think the price is going to come back down and you really are torn whether or not you should be investing in the company more. Should you pick up more shares? So I will kind of break down a few different scenarios, owning a certain number of shares at various prices, what happens when you buy 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 more shares, and not just what happens in the present to your average share price, but also what happens in the future when you go to sell off all of your shares at a specific target share price.